Hollywood is built on dreams, but sometimes those dreams turn into nightmares. Imagine spending over $100 million on a movie only for it to bomb so badly that it nearly bankrupts an entire studio. That's exactly what happened with Heaven's Gate, a film so disastrous that it changed Hollywood forever. But how do movies with sky-high expectations become legendary flops? Let's go behind the scenes of Hollywood's biggest failures. Hollywood loves a good success story. Massive blockbusters that break records, launch franchises, and make stars out of unknown actors. But for every Titanic or Avengers, there's a Battlefield Earth or Catwoman. Movies that had huge budgets, A-list stars, and massive hype, but still crashed and burned spectacularly. Some flops are doomed from the start, while others are victims of bad timing, terrible marketing, or behind-the-scenes chaos. What makes a film a Hollywood disaster? And why do studios keep making the same mistakes? Today, we're diving deep into the fascinating stories behind Hollywood's most shocking box office failures, from disastrous productions to the decisions that sealed their fate. Movie flops have existed since the early days of Hollywood, but some failures are so big that they become legendary. One of the earliest disasters? Cleopatra, 1963, starring Elizabeth Taylor. The film was supposed to be the most glamorous epic of all time, but production spiraled out of control, from constant rewrites to costly delays. Originally budgeted at $2 million, the film ballooned to over $44 million, the equivalent of over $400 million today. But even Cleopatra couldn't prepare Hollywood for the disasters of the modern era. Movies like The Adventures of Pluto Nash, The Lone Ranger, and Cats weren't just flops, they were embarrassments. Why? It all comes down to bad decisions, massive egos, and unexpected disasters. Let's start with one of the most infamous flops of all time. Heaven's Gate, 1980, the film that destroyed a studio. After winning an Oscar for The Deer Hunter, director Michael Cimino was Hollywood's golden boy. His next project, Heaven's Gate, was supposed to be an epic Western masterpiece. Instead, it became a cautionary tale of what happens when a director gets unchecked power. From the very start, production was a disaster. Cimino demanded entire sets be rebuilt because they were an inch too short. He refilmed scenes hundreds of times, causing massive delays. The film's original budget of $11 million skyrocketed to $44 million, a fortune at the time. When it finally premiered, critics hated it, audiences stayed away, and the studio, United Artists, collapsed under the financial weight of the disaster. The failure of Heaven's Gate was so extreme that it led Hollywood to end the era of director-driven filmmaking, shifting power back to studios. John Carter, 2012, Disney's $200 million disaster. Fast forward to 2012, and history repeated itself with John Carter, a sci-fi blockbuster that was supposed to be Disney's next Star Wars. The problem? No one knew what it was about. The marketing was a mess. The film's title, John Carter, was so generic that audiences had no idea it was based on a beloved sci-fi novel from 1912. The original title, John Carter of Mars, was changed because Disney's executives believed that movies with Mars in the title don't sell. It didn't help that the budget exploded to $250 million, one of the biggest in history. When the movie flopped, Disney lost over $200 million, making it one of the biggest box office disasters ever. Battlefield Earth, 2000, Scientology's Hollywood failure. Some flops are so bad they become legends. Battlefield Earth, starring John Travolta, is one of them. Based on a novel by Scientology founder L. Ron Hubbard, the film was pushed by Travolta as a passion project. But from the start, the production was a disaster. The dialogue was laughable. The camera angles were weird and disorienting. The special effects looked outdated, even for 2000. Despite a $73 million budget, Battlefield Earth made just $29 million worldwide. Critics tore it apart, and it remains one of the worst-reviewed movies of all time. The Adventures of Pluto Nash, 2002. Eddie Murphy's biggest regret. Some movies flop because they're too ambitious. Others, like The Adventures of Pluto Nash, fail because they should have never been made in the first place. This sci-fi comedy starring Eddie Murphy had a staggering $100 million budget. But when it hit theaters, no one showed up. The film made just $7 million worldwide, making it one of the biggest box office bombs ever. Even Murphy himself later admitted he regretted making the movie. Cats, 2019. The nightmare that should have stayed a musical. And finally, we can't talk about flops without mentioning Cats, 2019, a movie that had everything going for it and still became a complete disaster. The film cost $100 million to make. It featured huge stars like Taylor Swift, Idris Elba, and Judi Dench. It was based on one of the most successful Broadway musicals of all time. But then the trailers dropped. The nightmare-inducing CGI became an internet joke, cats with human faces, floating fur, and horrifying expressions. The backlash was instant. Even after last-minute edits, the damage was done. Cats became a laughingstock, making just $75 million worldwide, far below what it needed to break even. So why do these films fail? Most of the time, it's a perfect storm of bad decisions. For Heaven's Gate, it was a director with unchecked power and a ballooning budget. For John Carter, it was Disney's failure to properly market the film. Cats suffered from rushed visual effects and an overconfident studio. Some flops happen because of studio interference, like Fantastic Four, 2015, where Fox clashed with director Josh Trank. Others are doomed by terrible timing, like The Lone Ranger, 2013, which arrived when audiences had already moved on from old-school westerns. Surprisingly, some of these flops found new life years later. Heaven's Gate was re-evaluated and is now considered a misunderstood masterpiece. Cats became a cult classic for how bizarre it is. And John Carter? It has a dedicated fan base that still argues Disney should have made a sequel. Still, most flops never recover. Studios bury them, actors refuse to talk about them, and they serve as reminders of Hollywood's biggest mistakes. Hollywood is unpredictable. A film can have everything: big stars, huge budgets, talented directors, and still fail spectacularly. Some flops change the industry, while others fade into obscurity. But one thing's for sure, no matter how much money you throw at a project, success is never guaranteed. What's the biggest Hollywood flop you've ever seen? Let us know in the comments. Subscribe for more behind-the-scenes Hollywood stories, and check out our other videos for more industry secrets.